This is Gentle Confessions, where every whisper holds a truth, and every silence holds a story. Tier 1. The envelope on the windowsill. It was a gray Sunday morning, the kind that curled around the edges of your thoughts like soft fog creeping in through an open window. The kettle had just begun to hum, and I was wrapped in the same cardigan I wore every weekend, a habit more than a fashion choice. That morning felt no different than any other. But grief has a strange way of disguising itself, hiding behind the ordinary until it slips into your hands. The letter was waiting for me on the windowsill, not in the mailbox, not slipped under my door. It just sat there. The envelope was a warm beige, the kind that hinted at age, but not neglect. It had no stamp, no postmark, just my name, written in her handwriting. I would have known it even if the ink had run. Her letters always leaned slightly left, like they were afraid to stand alone. I didn't touch it right away. There was a pause. One of those quiet moments where time slows down but your heart speeds up. I stood there, watching the envelope as if it might vanish or explode or whisper something I wasn't ready to hear. My tea had gone cold by the time I finally picked it up. Her name wasn't on it, but it didn't have to be. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the winter of 2016. The silence between us had grown roots, taken shape like ivy on brick. We left things unfinished. Not angry. Just paused. A pause so long it became its own kind of ending. I used to replay our last conversation in my head like an old voicemail. She'd been the one to reach out. Always. The one to check in. The one to notice when I'd gone quiet. And I had been too wrapped in myself. Too tired. Too unsure of how to respond without breaking something. I convinced myself that if she needed me, really needed me, she'd try again. But people don't knock on closed doors forever. And now, years later, her handwriting was on my windowsill. I sat at the kitchen table, letter in hand, fingers trembling just enough to notice. I turned it over twice before opening it, as if I could absorb something through the paper itself, the way we do with photos, with ticket stubs, with memories. There was only one page inside, folded once. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, just like her. Her words began simply. I didn't know where else to send this. That line alone cracked something inside me. It was the kind of sentence that carries 1,000 unsaid things in its shadow. The kind of sentence you write when time is no longer patient. She wrote about small things. A recipe she'd tried and failed. A memory of us, sitting in her car with the heater on full blast, sharing silence in the most comfortable way. She mentioned a song that made her think of me. A bookstore she visited in the spring. It was as though she had continued our friendship quietly, alone, writing to me in her heart every time she couldn't reach me. And then she wrote something I still carry in my chest. I forgive you, even if you don't know what you did. The tears didn't come all at once. They crept in, like the morning light over the windowsill where her letter had appeared. I read it 3 times before I folded it back up and pressed it to my lips. That was when I saw the second envelope, tucked beneath the first, thinner, No name. Just the faintest indentation on the flap, where her seal used to be. I reached for it with hands I barely trusted. And that is when the story truly began. Tier 2. The words I wasn't ready for. I stared at the envelope for what felt like an entire afternoon. The paper had grown softer from time, and the ink on the address had faded into a ghost of itself. Her handwriting elegant, looping, unmistakably hers was still there. My fingers trembled as I slid my thumb beneath the flap, careful not to tear anything, as if it were something sacred. There are letters that ask to be opened, and there are letters that wait for you to be ready. I was not ready, but I opened it anyway. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Faint lavender, her scent. The one that used to linger on the sleeves of her sweaters, or in the passenger seat of my car. My eyes burned before I'd even read a single word. And then, her voice. Hi. You. I don't know if this will ever find you. Or if it does. Whether you'll open it. But I hope you do. Her voice was in the ink. It spoke through the quiet of my room. Through the ache that had not left since the day I heard she was gone. I'm writing this because I've always believed in the power of last things. Last hugs. Last glances. Last words. We didn't get one. You and I. Not really. I paused. My breath shaky. A drop of something, maybe sorrow. Maybe guilt, fell onto the paper. I wiped it away too late. It blurred a word. One I'll never know. I want you to know something. I forgive you. For everything. For the silence. For not being there. For what you couldn't say. She forgave me. Just like that. Words on a page. But it felt like a wave had come and swept something heavy from my chest. I wasn't always easy to be around. I know that. But when you left, it wasn't just you. It was light. It was color. I felt it. I missed it. But I understood. I could barely keep reading. Her voice. So calm. So certain. Echoed through my mind like wind rustling through a tree I used to climb as a child. People think panic is loud. But mine was always quiet. It came in stillness. In the moments between things. You used to see it before anyone else did. You used to sit beside me and say nothing. And somehow, that made it better. I closed my eyes, remembering those nights, those late bus rides. That one morning she couldn't speak, and I just handed her my scarf and sat next to her for an hour. No words, just presence. How had I let all of that vanish? Her letter went on. I hope you're happy now. I hope you've forgiven yourself. I hope you know you mattered. Even when I couldn't show it. Even when I pulled away. Even when she pulled away. I'd taken it personally. Like I always did. I made it about me. My ego. My hurt. But her pain was never about me. It was inside her. Carried silently. And I had misunderstood. This isn't a goodbye. This is a thank you. For every silly joke. Every stolen hour. Every quiet act of kindness you thought I didn't notice. I did. I always did. I folded the letter slowly, like it was the most delicate thing in the world. I placed it back in its envelope, and I whispered into the silence of my room, "I saw you too. I always did." Tier 3. The rain that spoke for me. I remember the sound of rain more vividly than the conversation itself. It was the kind of evening where everything felt heavy, yet nothing was said. The windows fogged with the breath of silence, and the city lights smeared softly against the glass like old memories too blurred to revisit. I had been holding her letter in my hand for an hour, unopened. My thumb traced the edge of the paper like it might reveal answers through osmosis. Outside, the rain had started in whispers, as if the sky itself didn't want to interrupt the hush between us. That day, I was staying in her apartment. She had left early, leaving behind the envelope and a cup of tea I never touched. The steam had long disappeared, just like the warmth between us. The rain grew louder. Not angry, not violent, just persistent, as though it was speaking on her behalf, saying everything she couldn't or wouldn't say. I sat by the windowsill, letter still sealed. It felt wrong to read it. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. What if the words inside undid the fragile narrative I had built to protect myself? What if it was full of truths I wasn't yet ready to hold? It was easier to listen to the rain. Each drop became a thought she might have had. Each ripple on the glass, a sentence she wanted to whisper but never did. The thunder in the distance, maybe that was the scream she swallowed so many nights when I dismissed her fears as overreactions. I remembered the night she tried to tell me about her anxiety. It was raining then too. She had been pacing, eyes frantic, breath short, fingers trembling as they clutched at nothing in particular, like she was drowning in air. And I laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Not loud. Just a nervous chuckle. A stupid, clumsy thing that betrayed how unequipped I was to hold her storm. I didn't know that my laughter would be louder than the panic in her chest. Back at the window, the rain was now steady like a metronome for regret. I finally slipped my finger under the flap of the envelope, careful not to tear anything but the silence. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting small, neat, shaking. I needed you to sit with me in the dark, not fix the light, just be there. You always tried to explain the thunder, but I only needed your umbrella. That was it. 12 words that echoed louder than anything she had said aloud in all our time together. I pressed the letter to my chest like it might erase the chuckle that started all this. But rain doesn't unfall. It just soaks through. Later that night, I wrote her back. Not to justify. Not to repair. Just to confess that I had heard the rain, now really heard it. And it was her voice all along. Tier 4, when I finally called her. It took me 3 days to gather the courage to dial her number. 3 days of circling my apartment like a ghost, of walking to the kitchen without being hungry, of opening my phone and locking it again before the screen even lit up. I rehearsed what I might say in my head so many times that it lost meaning. Every version ended in silence, or worse, in her not answering at all. But I knew I had to. Not because I expected forgiveness, but because silence was beginning to rot the part of me that still remembered how her voice sounded when it was calm. The phone rang twice, then 3 times, then 4. And just as I was about to hang up, her voice came through. Small, guarded, tired. Hello, I froze. My mouth, suddenly a desert. All the words I'd planned shriveled beneath the weight of hearing her again. It's me, I finally said. A pause. Then I know. Those 2 words, spoken so flatly, knocked the wind out of me. There wasn't anger in them, but there was no warmth either. Just recognition. Like I was someone she used to know, someone she had to place carefully in her memory like a cracked photograph. I'm not calling to explain, I said quickly. I wanted you to know. I read your letter. Another pause. Then she said, okay. That word again. Like a lock clicking, but not opening. I took a breath, steadying the quake in my chest. You wrote, I only needed your umbrella. I never realized how much rain you were standing in. She didn't reply. I laughed that night. I continued. Not because I didn't believe you, but because I didn't understand. I was scared. I didn't know what to do with your fear, so I tried to make it small enough for me to handle. And I failed you. There was a breath on the other side. Sharp. Almost like a sob. If she hadn't caught it so quickly. You know what the worst part was? She said, voice trembling. It wasn't even that you laughed. It was that you left right after that you saw me drowning and walked out the door like I was just being dramatic. I swallowed hard. I know. No. You don't. She snapped, not cruelly, but like someone finally breaking a dam she had held back for too long. You didn't just laugh at me. You made me feel like I was the joke. My eyes welled up. I pressed my palm against my chest, like that could hold the ache back. I'm not calling to ask you to forget, I said softly. I just needed you to know that I haven't. I remember. And I regret it. Every day. The silence that followed was heavy. But it didn't feel like the end. It felt like she was thinking, feeling, measuring the space between pain and possible peace. Finally, she asked, why now? It was a fair question. One I had asked myself too many times. Because I finally heard the rain, I said. And I finally listened to what it was trying to say. She didn't say anything for a while. And when she did, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close. I'm not angry anymore, she said. But I still carry it. I know. I might always carry it. I'll carry it with you. I whispered. The line went quiet again. But something in that silence felt less like goodbye, and more like a hand extended in the dark. Not quite held. Not quite let go. Just there. And that, for now, was enough. Tier 5. The apology I whispered to the rain. It rained again the night after we spoke. Not a storm. Not a thunderous downpour. Just that kind of steady, unhurried rain that blankets the city in silver. Silence the kind that doesn't rush to flood, but gently reminds you that everything, eventually, must be washed clean. I sat by the window, forehead against the glass, watching droplets race each other down the pane. The street lamps outside blurred in gold halos, flickering softly like memories refusing to fade. It was strange how much the rain reminded me of her. Not the drama of our falling out, but the softness of her voice when she wasn't trying to be brave. She always said the rain made her feel seen. Like the sky is finally speaking my language, she'd say with a half smile. Back then, I thought it was poetic nonsense. Now, I wish I had asked her to teach me the words. That night, I wrote her a letter. Not one to send. Just one to release. I folded the paper 3 times, the way she used to. And instead of an envelope, I tucked it under a coffee mug, weighted down like the heaviness in my chest. Then I opened the window and let the cold slip in. And I spoke. Not loudly. Not with the desperate volume of someone trying to be heard. But softly. Like she might be standing somewhere just outside the glass. Listening. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. I whispered. A gust of wind danced in, brushing my face like fingers too shy to touch. I'm sorry I tried to shrink your world just because I didn't understand it. The rain tapped gently on the windowsill, as if it remembered. I'm sorry I thought survival meant pretending to be okay. And finally, I'm sorry I left. The words didn't echo. They just disappeared into the night, like offerings to a past self that no longer had power over me. Like apologies meant more for the person I used to be than the person I had hurt. I didn't expect redemption. I didn't expect healing to come neatly, wrapped in one conversation. But in that moment that still, rainy moment, I felt the ache inside me shift, not disappear, but loosen its grip. Like forgiveness might not be something she had to give me, but something I could begin to give myself. I closed the window. The mug sat quietly on the desk. The letter beneath it would stay unread. That was okay. Some apologies aren't meant to be received. They're meant to be released. Outside, the city kept raining. Inside, I sat in the quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was learning how to float.